This is Learning to Dad.
I'm a cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm going to have fun, and you're going to have fun.
Hey, Kyle Jetsel. I just said it out loud. Kyle Jetsel. Good to see you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing real good, Tyler. I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat with you and talk about parenting and all those crazy things that go with it. So,
I'm very happy to have you here. I know just very little about you, but you have 6 kids. I presume it was Shelly is the mother of all 6, and she's passed. And you talk about having an autistic kid, and there being, defiance, autism, suicidal thoughts, like really a lot of deep stuff to talk about. But I'd love to start on a little bit of a lighter note. Tell me what it is that you do for a profession. Give me kind of a last 15, 20 year evolution of your work life.
So I guess for the last 15 or 20 years, I've been focused on, I do some marketing consulting and do create marketing systems for a lot of companies. And I've done that a lot, but really my passion and what I've kind of where I've ended up is when you have 6 kids and they're every type of personality from, type A, aggressive to passive aggressive to extroverts and introverts. And my youngest now are 16. I have 16-year-old twins that are my youngest. My oldest son is 30. We have what we would consider to be a top 1% happy family. Yeah. And I think when we're out and about, people see that in us. And it's led me to become, based on the fact that we struggled early on and we had some serious challenges with a lot of our kids. My wife and I really were able to create basically a recipe and a systematic approach to try to parent them, to help them, achieve their full potential. Our goal was always, we want them to be their very best selves. And so my wife and I worked hard and like crazy and basically designed a life where they could do that. And what ended up happening is people saw that. And I started getting approached by people that said, tell me what the heck you're doing. And so that kind of grew into us sharing our family recipe. And I now run a little company called The Secrets of Parenting Strong-Willed Kids.
That's such a gentle description.
Yeah, it is gentle because, I could share with you some stories that would not be gentle whatsoever. I've had, luckily, I learned a lot of this when my sons were younger. I have five of my kids are boys, and I have one daughter. And my 5 boys now are all bigger and stronger, and they're men. Even my 16-year-old son is 6'5", 200 plus pounds, just a monster of a kid. And I'm so grateful that I learned what I did when he was young so that he wouldn't beat me up now, right? Because he certainly could do that. Yeah. But we did have situations where we had violence in our homes where our kids were so strong-willed and so defiant that they would try almost anything to get their way. And it ended up in certain circumstances where there was, I had my more severely autistic son took a swing at me one day. And growing up, I boxed a little bit so I could manage myself just fine. So I'm not afraid. And I was very good with him at dodging and ducking. I know how to manage distance. I learned all that stuff as a boxer. But he caught me one day in my ear just with a full-on swing. And blood started running down my ear. And I remember this was one of the moments in my life where I was pushed to my limit of fury, right? You know how it is when you experience pain or you feel attacked, the natural man comes out, right? And sometimes that man is not a kind, gentle, loving father. Yeah. And I remember that started to bubble up. And I was thinking, he was probably 17 at the time. And I thought, you know what? I am not having this. I'm about to knock this kid out and he'll never do this again. And I remember in that moment thinking, catching myself in that heat and thinking, you know what? He's got a mental disability. And I don't know that long term, if I punch him or I fight with him, is that going to be helpful or productive? And as that went through my mind, I thought, how can I address this in a spirit of love with him? How can I? He's just hit me. He's got me bleeding out of my ear. But you know what? The best way to approach this would be to do something to show him I love him. And so I remember in that moment, I snapped into a more productive state because I had trained myself to do this over the years in different situations. And I said, please, I just let my eyes, because it hurt. It hurt.
Yeah.
And my eyes welled up with tears. And I said to him, please don't hit me. I love you. And the rage in him went from full on rage to just, he knew he had done something he shouldn't. And I saw kindness. And I saw, and remember, he's severely autistic, so it's hard for him to express emotions. But I saw sadness. And I realized in that moment he had lost control, and it wasn't really, he didn't want to do that. It's not like he was trying to fight me. I mean, he had to know he wasn't going to win anyway. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was kind of a turning point for him and me in our lives. And it became a point where when he would get angry and he would, sometimes it was autism and sometimes just bad behavior. But if I showed forth more love towards him in those moments and said, hey, listen, buddy, please don't get angry. It's not going to help. Let's figure this out. And it really became a turning point for us, for me and him in our relationship. And it allowed him to see, I think, that I loved him even in those hardest moments. And it changed the way he started to do things with me. And it definitely changed me. It made me realize there's no better way to address struggles and challenges than with an expression of love somehow, if we can do that. And it was something that we had learned how to do as a family. But, you can talk about doing something. We can all talk about what we should do. But when things go absolutely crazy and chaotic, it's really hard to do it in those moments. And knowing that I could do that in that moment, and he knew I loved him no matter what, changed our relationship.
How long ago was that, Kyle?
So he's now 24. So it was probably maybe at 17 or 18 when this happened to him. So it's been 5 or 6 years now, I guess.
So, Matt, put yourself as a younger man contending with that circumstance where you have a 17-year-old kid that's yours doing that to you. How do you think a younger you would have handled that versus the connection, making the connection?
I'll tell you how a younger man would have handled that. And I'm so grateful I had gotten to a place where I could do that, because a younger me would have knocked him out. I mean, I'm not afraid, Tyler. I grew up in the hood where violence and the threat of violence is a very necessary and a very impactful and a very effective way to manage your world, right? When you grow up in those circumstances, you learn pretty quickly, if I don't stand up, then if I can't take a punch and throw a punch, I'm going to get abused. Mm-hmm. And so you learn to fight. And I was a fighter, right? And when I had my first 2 sons, I remember they were defiant, but I ruled with an iron fist. And they were scared of me, my oldest 2 sons, when they were little. And I remember it was interesting because it was causing problems between my wife and I, because my wife was the polar opposite of me. She was a feminine, kind, sweet Southern belle, right? I don't know what she saw in me. I don't really understand. And maybe she saw what I was capable of becoming if she molded me. But but yeah, when my sons came along, and she was shocked by them, that they were doing these things, and everything was a fight with them. They just did not want to obey. They wanted to, those kids, right? We all know those kids, right? Mm-hmm. And she was loving on them, and I was scaring them, right? Yeah. I would come home, and she would be pulling her hair out because she'd been just battling these kids all day. And I would say, I got this. I'll take care of it. And I would go in there and put the fear of God into them, and they would behave. But it really wasn't. I realized after a while, long term, they were going to grow up, right? And I had heard somewhere that when you parent with fear and guilt and shame, kids they feel controlled and they want to escape, right? Kids don't want to feel controlled. And so I had heard that, and I also heard when you parent with kindness and patience and love, kids feel empowered and want to be their best, right? But I was just doing what worked, and that's all I really knew, you know. And I'll never forget one morning. It was one morning really early, and my more severely autistic son, he woke up the whole family at about 6:30 in the morning with a blood-curdling scream. And he was nonverbal. All the things you hear about autism, they're the really hard stuff. That's him.
Yeah.
And so he couldn't tell us what it was. He was screaming. He was out of control. He was having a meltdown. And usually a meltdown could last anywhere from maybe 15 minutes to an hour. This one lasted 4 hours, right? And it was the stress in our home was overwhelming. And it's been reported that stress in a home where you're raising a son, an autistic child, is comparable to combat. And I promise you, that was how it was. And, you know, my wife was trying everything she could think of to calm him down, and I was trying everything I could think of, and he just wouldn't calm down. Well, after about 4 hours, he finally ended up calming down. And I remember sometimes I think when things aren't going well, you look for somebody to blame, and sometimes it's the person closest to you. And in this case, she turned on me, and I turned on her, and and you probably know what I'm talking about, this argument where you start defending your ground and they defend their ground, and it just gets bad, right? And she was saying, if you would be more kind and loving and patient, he would have calmed down. And I would say, he needs discipline in his life. He can't be screaming and yelling, right? It's just this. And I realized very quickly, my wife wasn't one. She was very feminine and passive and beautiful and all those characteristics. But this was a fight she wasn't backing down from. She'd had it. And so after arguing way too long, I realized that I was getting ramped up emotionally and physically, and I could feel the heat. And I thought, I've got to step away. And I went out on the front porch, and I remember I had my keys in my pocket, and I thought, I'm leaving. This is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for a crazy home. I didn't sign up for a crazy wife. I didn't sign up for crazy kids. There's stress in our home all the time. It's unbearable. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. And that crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And in that moment, a memory of my father, a lesson my father had taught me, popped into my mind. And the memory was I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I was playing in a baseball game. And we were winning the game, and we needed one out to win the game. And the kid hit the ball to me, and I made an error. And as always happens, right, the next couple of kids got hits, and they won, and we lost. It was all my fault. If I had made one play, we would have won. And I remember going over to my father, and just with tears in my eyes, you know, when you're 11 or 12, that's your world. Yeah. And it was the end of the world for me. And I said, you know what, Dad, I wish they hadn't hit the ball to me, because then we could have won. And I remember my dad got down on my level, and he said, you know what, son? That's not the way we do things. You don't ever want to leave your success or failure in anybody else's hands. You want to work and practice and work, and you want every ball of every game to be hit to you. Don't you ever pass the buck. If something is important to you, you want the responsibility. So you go work, and you take charge, and you take the last shot every game, and you want every ball. And I want you out there when you're playing baseball to say, I want every ball all game long hit to me, because I'm prepared, and I've worked, and I know what to do. And if I make a mistake, that's okay. But I never want to give somebody else control of my success or failure. And, you know, that memory popped into my mind right then, and I thought, I can't leave. This is important. My family matters. These are my boys. This is my wife. And so I did something else my father had taught me. I went under a pecan tree and I prayed. I just, you know, and I didn't know what else to do. I'll try divine intervention, you know, whatever. I'm not above any answer for anything. I'll try it all, right? And I remember as I prayed, I remember feeling like God told me, the problem is not your wife, and the problem is not your kid. The problem is you. You got to get better. And I remember thinking, boy, that sucks, man, because it seems like the rest of the world is conspiring against me. I'm doing everything I know, but the other side of it was I can't control anybody else but myself. And maybe there's some things I can learn and do that'll help solve these problems, right? So I remember I went inside and my wife was still angry. Those things don't just go away very quickly. And I said to her, you know what, I'm not leaving and I'm going to fix this. And in that moment, she was still mad and she said to me, good luck, right? And I realized she had lost faith in me as a husband and a father. And that was my first thing I needed to do was to step up and say, I've got to restore her faith in me as a husband and a father. And I'm going to take steps in that direction. And I don't really care. I don't really care if I never succeed. I'm going to die trying. I'm never going down because this is a fight worth having, and it really sent me on a path of really understanding that who I was as a father was not supporting my kids and who I was as a husband was not supporting my wife. And I just started, when you start to search for things and when you take responsibility, you find them. And I made a lot of mistakes and I found a lot of things, and it really brought me to a point where, before my wife passed away, we had a top 1% happy marriage and a top 1% happy family. And it was just a beautiful thing to watch our world go from peril to just thriving and to just a wonderful situation as a family and as a husband and wife. So that's kind of where it all began for me.
Just the moments leading up to our hitting the record button and the conversation that we've been having now, I have difficulty picturing you as anything other than kind of a kind and gentle and open person. So, like you acknowledge, we don't change in a snap. We have work that we have to do to change. Can you talk about the work that you put in to work on yourself and the ownership that you had to take to get from where you were up until that like traumatic event and to where you are now?
I think, and I probably should reveal this too. If the animal inside it never goes away, it's there. Yeah. Right. And I really believe I am a kinder, more gentle human being. And I think men should be kind and gentle, but I also think it's better to be a warrior in the garden than it is to be a gardener in the war, right? I'm not suggesting that we are not men, strong, powerful, capable men, right? And even capable of violence, right? I think that's okay. What we need to be is have control of that and know how to manage that, right? And so I like that part about myself. When you grow up in that atmosphere, it makes you feel tough, and I'm never scared, and I feel that confidence I thought I needed to keep, right? But I also realized I watched my wife just turn things into beautiful things. Everywhere she went, she left it more beautiful, and it was because she was so kind and patient, and I realized that that's not really what I was leaving behind because of my approach, right? I heard one time a director of a movie, he was talking about these Marvel movies, right? And he says it's interesting that in these movies, the hero and the villain, they both have the same backstory. And I thought, what? And he says the villain, he grows up and he's treated unkindly, and the world is rough on him and it treats him unkindly. And he grows up and the villain says, the world hurt me, so I'm going to hurt it back, right? And he says the hero grows up and he's hurt and he faces challenging things. And he grows up and he says, you know what? The world hurt me. I'm not going to let that happen to anybody else. And that's really the difference in the hero and the villain, right? And I was a villain. I was a villain in my own home. I was a villain with my wife. And that's what I was really putting out into the world. And guess what? That's what was coming back. And so I started to realize, and I really started asking my wife a lot of questions about how do you manage your emotions and how do you do this and how do you do that? And I think the most important thing she and I ended up doing together was we created. I remember one night we were reading the kids a book. We finally got them settled down a little bit, and we were reading Alice in Wonderland. And there's a part where Alice comes to a crossroads, and you probably remember this. It's a famous part. And there's a cat, the Cheshire cat, right? Mm-hmm. And she says, "Hey, which way should I go?" And the cat says, "Well, it depends. It depends on where you want to end up." And she says, "Well, I don't really know where I want to end up." And he says, "Well, it don't really matter which way you go then. You just keep walking and you'll end up somewhere, right?" Yeah. And as we were reading this, my son says, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it means you can run really fast, but if you don't have a place you want to end up, you're never going to get there. You're going to end up somewhere. But it's important to know where you want to go." And in that moment, I thought to myself, I don't even know. I haven't even really mapped out what I want for my family and for myself and for my wife. And I really need to really get serious about creating a list of things like that I want to see as an end result, right? I want to raise strong, buoyant, happy kids, right? Who are going to go out into the world and create good and share happiness and be good people, right? And I want them to be optimistic and approach the world in that way. And I don't want to break them of their strong will, because it's going to help them in the future. I want to aim them in a direction that allows them to understand if they discipline themselves, that strong will is an asset, right? The spirit they have, spirited kids, that's a good thing. If we try to break them, and I was just trying to break them, I just didn't want them to fight back, right? I didn't want them to argue, and I realized I've got to be better at guiding, and to do that, I really have to show them a model. I have to become a model of who they can be and try to emulate those things in my own life. And so it led me down a path of really discovering optimism and how to overcome those things. And I read so many books, and, how can I be more kind and heightened in discouraging moments? Or how can I treat my wife like the angel that she is, right? How can I, even when she's attacking me, I've got to be bigger than the moment. And so, a lot of it was just self-discovery for me. And then as I started to make some changes, my wife, I'll never forget the moment I think she saw, and I think I really had gained some of her respect back, was we were going to go to the park as a family. And I had developed this strategy in my mind of steps I would take when one of my sons got real defiant or angry. And he did that regularly. And so we were going to go to the park. We were getting ready. And I heard my son upstairs smash a wall. And usually that was a trigger that he's getting really upset about something. So I ran up. I told my wife I got it. And I ran up there, and I went up there and I applied my strategy. It's a series of steps I follow that are done in a loving, kind way. And I calmed him down, And then I came back downstairs and I said, "Okay, I think everything's good. We can go to the park now." And she said, "Wait a minute. That's not healthy." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "You can't suppress your emotions, Kyle. Yeah, I know you're angry, but you're just balling them up and you're going to explode." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not balling them up. As a matter of fact, I feel really good because I went upstairs and I handled my son in a very specific, loving way." And she said, "What did you do?" "Wait a minute. What did you do?" And I told her my steps, right? And she said, "Oh, that's really cool." And I said, "He's happy. I got him back to square. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to go over to the park and he does it again." And by the way, he did, right? But what could have happened is it could have ruined our day. And we didn't go to the park, and we said, these kids, if they would just act right, we can't even take them to the park, But we ended up going to the park, and he had a difficult moment at the park. And I went over there and I used the same strategy. And I looked over, and she was talking to some other ladies, and I could tell she was telling them what I was doing now. And I got him back to square, and he hopped on a swing and started swinging, and it was a great day, right? And when I walked back over to my wife at the park, she said, "Tell these ladies what you're doing." I was telling them about it, right? And I'm like, holy crap. It was because I managed myself in a way that expressed love even in those difficult moments, right? And then I had a chance to share it with her, and she's like, "Oh, that's really cool. Let's do it together." And once the combined two of us got together on these things, the changes became dramatic because we started working as a team, she and I, and combining my desire for discipline with her desire for love and kindness. And the combination of those two things was just the best of both worlds, right? And it set us on a path to just recovery as a family and turning into just a happy family that loves each other, that wants to be together, that has overwhelming fun, and people see that, right? And now I've got a son who's 30 and 27, and they're out in the world doing the same things, right? But it all started with just really sitting down and saying, and I've actually got the map. I actually got the map that we created. And it's really, it's the idea, and to get to where we wanted to go, we had to really have an optimum idea of exactly what we wanted. And then everything became submissive to that mission, right? Instead of submissive to each other as a couple or the kids, we became submissive to the mission. And the mission became what our goal was. So
habits and patterns are incredibly difficult to break and require a lot of discipline and generally take a lot of time to practice and get good at it. Did you feel like it took a while for you and Shelley to do that, or did you feel like one day it turned and then suddenly you were both pulling on the same rope?
It took a while because one of the things that she would tell me is, and this was we created a strategy for this, and I'll share it with you because it's really I want everybody to understand this, is she would see me doing things and she would say, yeah, but I can't do that. That's not my personality, or that's not the way I roll, or whatever the case may be, right? And for a long time, I just took it. And I said, you know what? I got this, babe. And I wanted to be her hero, right? I wanted to be the hero of the story. So when she had struggles with him, I would grab him. And I would say, babe, you take it easy. I got this. And I would just, right? I wanted to be her hero, and I wanted her to see me that way. But over a period of time, I think she realized, hey, Kyle can't be here all day long, every day. And I got to manage these wild animals, right?
Yeah.
And so as she saw me applying some of the love strategies she used, she started doing some things. But one of the things that was very challenging for us is we do the right thing for 5 or 6 times in a row. And then we would, you can't do it perfect forever, right?
Yeah.
And then you just get exhausted or overwhelmed, and you fall back into your pattern, right? Screaming and yelling and fighting, right? And that's a common pattern. And so I remember one day she came to me and she said, whenever I mess up, I feel like I failed. And I feel guilt and shame, and I feel like I'm never going to get it. And I said, well, why don't we? I said, I do too. Whenever I mess up, I kill myself. I beat myself up and I say, am I ever going to get this? Am I ever going to be a good parent? Right? And I said, maybe we should create a strategy for that, right? For when we fall off. And so we got together and we started working on this, and we came up with a strategy we called 100% accountability and a whole lot of grace, right? And the idea was that, why are we just giving it? We could do something right for 5 times. And in the 6th time, we shouldn't be saying, I'll never get this. We should say, we should give ourselves grace, and we should take accountability for it, right? And if you're a religious person, it's kind of the repentance process, right? You have to admit, right, that you've sinned, and then you repent, and God forgives you every time, right? He'll forgive you as long as you admit and repent. He'll forgive you, right? And so I said, let's create something for ourselves. So when we make a mistake, we're going to hold ourselves accountable, and if we need to, even apologize to our kids. And then we're going to give ourselves a whole lot of grace. We're not going to guilt ourselves. We're not going to shame ourselves. We're not going to go down the hole of I'll never get this. We're going to say, I did it 5 times in a row. I'm not going to ever be perfect. I'm always going to make mistakes. And we even taught our kids that. You're never going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. But when you're accountable for those mistakes, and maybe you apologize to those that you've hurt or offended or you messed up with, that's the first part, is be accountable for that mistake. Recognize it, but then give yourself grace and go back to work, right? And what it did was it removed the guilt and the shame and the wondering, because all we do when we guilt and shame and tear ourselves apart is we beat ourselves up so bad that we don't feel like we can do it, right? And we wanted to feel like we were going to continually try forever. Even if we never totally succeeded, that's okay. The joy should be in the pursuit and the working at it and trying to get a little bit better. And again, we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to fall off. We're always going to fall back into old patterns. But if we continually work at those new patterns enough, maybe they can become a more common part of our new pattern. And so that was really what we discovered as a couple was our job is not to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes. Our job is to hold ourselves accountable and say, you know what, I can do better. And give ourselves a lot of grace, right? And then get back on that wagon and say, I know what to do. I'm going to continually try to do the right things in the right circumstances. And it was a really powerful strategy we learned. And I love sharing it with other people because guilt and shame and fear and thinking you can't do it, you're right, you can't. None of us can. You're right. You can't. None of us can, right? But because we're always going to make mistakes, we're not perfect. But we can climb right back on and we continue to run down that path. And that's going to lead us to success a lot faster. And we're going to have a lot more success if we stay active in the pursuit of those things that matter.
So much of what you say resonates with me, and it sounds like you and Shelley did a lot of work individually and together and really evolved to be an amazing team in marriage and in parenthood. And I apologize for the abruptness of this question, but can you tell me about how and when Shelley passed and the process of managing yourself as a father and somebody supporting his family with your kids and life?
I would absolutely love to do that. I would love to do that because I think that's, it's layover from what she and I had done together, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I remember, my wife, she got sick with COVID in October of 2021, and 10 days later she passed. And so it was very, very sudden, and immediately, and very, very tragic, right? It's kind of tough losing your very best friend and your wife and the mother of your kids all at once, right? And I realized pretty quickly, this could destroy some things, right? Yeah. I mean, I even started reading, I didn't wait long to, this was bigger than just me, right? I got 6 kids. My twins are 13 at the time. And one of them is a daughter. And this could destroy them. It could destroy me. I mean, I heard a friend of mine one time told me a buddy of his lost his wife. And when the kids lost the wife, they lost the dad too, because he just couldn't they lost him too. He was incapable of being a good father, and I understand, believe me, I get it. It's hard, right? And so I immediately went to work and I thought, I'm going to read about this. I'm going to study this. I didn't wait. Part of my grieving process was figuring this out, right? And I read a lot of experiences where it ruined families. And I thought, can't have that. We've worked way too hard, put in way too much time. We're way too happy to let this destroy us. And so I started working on a plan for each child and for myself. For myself was first. You got to put the mask on your own face first. Right. And so I developed for myself. I created a couple of lifelines, what I called them, which is friends I reached out to and I said, hey, can you call me once a week?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Put it on your calendar, right, and check on me, right? And I'm a very, I had already become very buoyant. I'm a happy individual, right? And so they were shocked, right? And I said, listen, I know I'm capable of going into the depths of hell, and I need help. And I said, I need you to call me. And it was 4 friends. I said, I need you to call me once a week, random times. And those 4 friends would call me, and sometimes they saved me. Right? I needed the lifelines that they brought. I increased my prayer because I always feel like divinity is a lifeline for me. And I started documenting my thoughts and feelings every night. And as I did that, these are all coping mechanisms for me, right? I never documented my pain and suffering without deciding what I was going to do in writing to escape, right? Or to stand up and face that storm, or to move forward with hope and courage, right? So I would write out the pain, which I think is necessary. It was part of my grieving process. I can't avoid that. That's real. I can't just ignore it. But then I didn't want to leave it at that. I didn't want to leave it in the pain. I wanted to say, you know what? My next steps are I'm gonna run in this direction, or I'm gonna try these things, or I'm gonna do these things. And it really helped me map out a daily plan. I diaried for 6 straight months every night. 180 days every night. I wrote down my thoughts and how I was going to escape those thoughts. And also I kind of poured myself into my kids, right? It's hard to think about your own pain and suffering when you're focused on serving others. And so with 6 kids, that's 6 individuals that have different thoughts, different feelings, different fears and concerns, and right. And so, I made it a point to once a month to take each one of them individually and aside, just them, and have some really deep conversations, and nothing was off limits, and help them however I could. And sometimes it was just to cry together, right? Sometimes it was just to feel the pain because it's real. Other times it was, here's what I'm struggling with. And we would map a plan out of escape, or, how we could reach out to other people and serve other people to help us through those times. But it really was taking action. And I think that was the key component of the whole thing. Was I'm not going to just sit back and let the world beat the crap out of me, because it can, and it will. I'm not doing that. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write. I'm the author of my own life story, and I've already decided it's going to be a triumph or a tragedy. And that means I'm going to write the script, and I'm going to write my script every day. And it doesn't matter what happens to me. It matters what my script is in reaction to those events. And so, as a family, we really started writing and working in that direction. Not just me, but each of me and my kids individually, we had these conversations. And really, I've been amazed, Tyler. I mean, I've watched my kids. They've uplifted me, I think, more than I've uplifted them. They've brought strength into my life I didn't even know they had. And there were times when I needed it. They've saved me on many occasions, right? Because I think we're unafraid to address it and to say, listen, this is going to be hard. Let's work, right? Let's serve others, serve ourselves, and move, and don't wait. Some people say you need a time to grieve, and I think that's fine, but you can also be working during that time, right? You can be trying to figure out some things that'll help you continually be happy and joyful, and understand that things happen in our lives. Everybody's going to experience tragedy. Everybody's going to experience failure. Everybody's going to experience pain. Everybody's going to suffer, right? It's not unique to us. But how are we going to react to those things? And how are we going to, again, create worlds of happiness and joy that we can spread to other people? So,
you said, you get to choose the path if you know where you're going. And when you went through that experience of losing Shelley, your kids losing their mom, you made a deliberate choice to do everything you could to pick the path that was best to serve you and your kids. But it was as a result of having to go through that tragedy. Do you have any advice or recommendations for people to reach that level of certainty in your mission and your path without the inflection point of a tragedy like that?
You know what? I think probably all of us, Tyler, have made changes in our lives for the better without those major moments happening. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I think one of the things I would recommend is go back and document some of your own changes you've made in your life, right? I don't think everybody identifies for themselves their epiphany story, or right. You might, and your question is revealing to me, because you might be considering, well, I've never had this major, tragic, overwhelming event that snapped me into a new world, right? But I know you have. You just may not recognize it, right? You just may not. It may have just been more subconscious than conscious. But when you make it a conscious thing, you can just go back and do some review, right? And say, how did I get where I am? Right? There's a reason why you do what you do. And if you go back and review some of those things, you know what, you might be able to realize and find, wow, there was this series of events that ran me down this path. And it may not be a one moment, which I think most of our experiences in life aren't one moment, right? But I think it's a stacking of little things, of little things more than it is one moment, right? So the reality of it is, if you want to be driven to achieve something bigger than yourself, I think it's important to decide what it is you want, right? And then instead of looking for a big giant moment to make you snap into a new state or change yourself, because really the moment where I prayed to God and he said, the problem is you, that's not what changed me, right? It was every day, finding a new parenting book or grabbing a new self-help book or just deciding on my way home from work, you know what? I'm going to treat my wife like an angel no matter what happens tonight. She is going to know she is my angel. And doing that in that moment, the stacking of small events are what changes us. It's not the moment that we experience that event. It's the deciding that should create action that we're going to do consistently, right? Little bitty, tiny little actions sometimes. I'll share a story with you. My kids tease me about this. My wife was a great housewife and a great homemaker. She baked, she cooked. There was two things she didn't like to do. Okay, fold clothes and wash dishes. Okay, and I remember I'd come home and there would be dishes in the sink and unfolded clothes, and I would think, I've been gone for 10 hours, and you've had 10 hours to wash dishes and fold the clothes. And in my mind, I would think, why can't you do that? And it would, and then I would do it. I would do it for her because that's what good husbands do, right? They serve. But I would be mad inside, right? And one day I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm not really getting myself anywhere by being mad about this, right? So you know what I'm going to do? I know she doesn't like to wash dishes or fold clothes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash dishes and I'm going to fold clothes because it's going to be an expression of the love I have for her. So when she sees me washing dishes, whether she knows it or not, she's going to see me loving her. That's an expression of love. And I'm going to do it happily because I know what that means to her. Folding clothes the same way, right? So I started coming home and I'd see dishes and I'd be like, I got the dishes, babe. And I would smile and I would do them happily. And I would know whether she knew it or not, didn't matter. In my mind, I believe she knew I was expressing my love, right? And over a period of time, she realized what I was doing and she says, why you won't even let me do dishes anymore? And I said, I know, because it's my job, because you don't like doing them and I'm okay with it. And I want you to know I love you, right? And folding clothes, I wouldn't let anybody fold clothes anymore. My kids wouldn't even. I'm the clothes folder because she knew that meant love, right? And even after she passed, I won't let anybody touch the dishes because it's a pure expression of love for me. Now, I feel like when I do it, I feel like she knows I love her, right? And it's such a silly little thing, but the reality is that it's a simple little switch in idea, or it's a simple little thing that we do simple little things we do on a consistent basis that just start to stack, right? You're not going to reach the top of the mountain by running up to it and jumping and grabbing the side and pulling yourself up. It's going to be one move at a time, thousands of moves that get you from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, right? And you got to make the move right, and you got to do it right, and you got to make sure you don't freak out if you slip, all those things, right? But we can't be looking at the top of the mountain, right? We know it's up there, and we have to map out what we're trying to get to, but we've got to make one little small move every day, right? It's the action steps we take. And I would suggest anybody that's listening to this, decide one way to show your kids or your wife today. I'm going to pick one little thing today to show my wife I love her. She doesn't even have to know, but I know. And I'm going to do it in a loving way, right? I'm going to figure something out. I don't care if she even ever acknowledges it. It's all about me expressing my love to her and my kids. I'm going to figure out a way today. And then the next day, do something different, or do something, just one thing consistently over time. And before you know it, you're right on the edge of that top of that mountain. You're like, how did I get here? Right? I got to the top. I don't even know how I got here, but it was fun. right? Because I was just doing something. It's not a giant leap. It's a small moment. Consistently stacked is really what gets us to where we want to go.
Kyle, I've only cried on, I think, one of these podcasts, and I just had to wipe away 2 tears. That was a beautiful and profound answer that I appreciate, and personally, if nothing else and no one else, I am going to carry with me a lot. We're 45 in. I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
First, like people that want to find you online, social media, websites, where's the best place for someone to find
Yeah, my name is Kyle Jetsel. There's kylejetsel.com. That's a great place to find me. And you can find me on Facebook. If you type in Kyle Jetsel, I'm the only one. I have a unique last name. So I'm the only Kyle Jetsel out there. If you type in Kyle Jetsel on Facebook, that'll be me. You'll recognize me. So I'm easy to find.
So, if you were just to name 2 or 3 characteristics of that every father should have, like a super dad has to have these 2 or 3 attributes or characteristics, what would they be?
I would say emotional control, a high level of emotional control. Number 1. Number 2, I would say the ability to your ego not to be important to you anymore.
Yeah.
We've got to set our egos aside. When you set your ego aside and you start looking at things without your ego involved, it creates such a more positive world for you. You quit feeling attacked. You don't defend yourself anymore. You just start to, and the final thing is realize your kids are going to become just like you, right? And don't be afraid to model. It's one thing to tell your kids something. It's another thing to model the behavior that you think is the best for them, right? And for the world. And so get better, right? The best thing you can do for your wife and your kids is to get better. Learn to get better, right? So those 3 things would be the 3 things I would suggest.
If someone were to go through a tragedy, as someone who has been through a significant one, what's the very first thing they should do?
Don't wait, right? Don't wait to decide where you want to go. You're going to grieve either way. If you decide, I see too many people, they say, I need a month to grieve. Yeah, well, you might go into the depths of hell and never be able to escape. Right? And you're going to take some people with you. And there's going to be people coming to your rescue, but it's going to be painful. My suggestion is grieving is going to happen, whether you like it or not. Don't think you have to choose a certain way to grieve. Realize you're not the only one. Find resources for yourself and start to go through the process and maybe get a book on the 6 steps of grief and understand what you're experiencing, and then get outside of yourself. Reach out to others. For me, it was my kids. For me, it was writing and mapping out my plan for success. But I didn't wait. And that I think was a big saving grace for not only for my family but for me specifically, is I didn't wait. So even if it's hard, getting outside of yourself and reading about other folks that have had the same experience, or it's going to pass time, and the worst thing you can do is sit in your own mind, because the mind can be an evil thing when you're in a bad space, and it can suck you in, and I've seen people never escape that pain. So
television and movies, books, fictional dads. Is there one that resonates with you, or did you have a favorite fictional TV character, dad, movie dad, book dad that you just loved?
So fictional. See, I'm not a huge fictional guy. I'd rather read real true stories, but probably it's crazy that I like these movies, but some of my favorite movies and books are books about vengeance,
Yeah.
which I'm not that kind of a guy, right? I might have been early on, but I'm not that kind of a guy anymore. Because I think I came from this atmosphere. I love the you know, the Count of Monte Cristo is big on my list, right? Gladiator is big on my list, right? The guy's family is ripped away from him and he's treated horribly and they try to kill him and he's bent on revenge, but he has the thing is though, is it's the purpose, right? And I think that's kind of why I like these movies. There's this purpose that's bigger than them. It's not even about them anymore. And the selfishness is gone. It's about the purpose. And in both of those cases, the purpose isn't really good. It's vengeance, right? But the purpose is so strong that it drives them to move forward and run. You know, I'm a runner. Not I don't like to run, but I'm passionately pursuing things, right? So I'm constantly moving in a direction, and I need a direction that I feel is good, you know. And so those movies really resonate with me. One of my favorite books of all time. It's nonfiction, but it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And it will make you realize there's worse things than death, right? There's worse things than death. And, you know, to me, living an unhappy, unfulfilled life might be worse than death. You know, I heard a quote one time. A guy said, angry, bitter people live in an angry, bitter world, and happy, loving people live in a happy, loving world, and it's the same world. Right? And it really impacted me because I'm like, yeah, that's right. We create our worlds, and how much non-fun would it be to live in a bitter, angry world where everything's a fight and that's not fun. That's not, right? That's not what we want to do. We want to pursue happiness and joy and spew that everywhere we can and spread that as far and wide as we can. And certainly raise kids that have that. And imagine if we're all raising these kids that go out into the world and spread that. The difference we can make in this world, one kid at a time, really small little moments at a time. We don't have to change the world ourselves. We just have to change ourselves and then, you know, help our kids model that for the rest of the world. And who knows, right? Certainly, yeah.
That might be my favorite answer to that question. Let's suspend reality, and we got to get you into a fictional state of mind where there is no space, there's no limit to money. I'm going to ask you, what gift would you give every father on the planet if there's no limit to money, space, time, just from Kyle, Jetsel, every dad gets this?
You know what? I would say this. If I could give every dad a gift, I would give them the gift of knowing how to love their wives.
That's a great answer.
And because I think, you know, I used to tell my kids this, and not many people like to hear this, but my wife and I had developed a relationship that was so incredible that I used to tell my kids, listen, if we're on a boat and it's sinking and I can save all 6 of you kids, or I can save Shelly, y'all are going to die because I'm saving Shelly, right? And they loved it because they knew how much I loved their mom. It gave them, I think it gave them stability and comfort and strength and courage. And, you know, the model of a man that loves his wife, I got 5 sons. That relationship, my wife and I's relationship, if I could give everybody that relationship, every man that relationship, man, what a world we would live in, where devotion and love and just your greatest friendship and the greatest kindness, and you're still going to have trials and tribulations and arguments and right, but the ability to have that kind of relationship would change the world, and it would change your kids. Your kids see that and they think that's the expectation, and they try to do that themselves, right? They want to grow up and have that relationship. They know what it looks like, and then have their own kids and their kids see that, right? What a beautiful thing to me that would be. And that's really what I want to, you know, that's what I want my kids to see. They've got a model now. They know what it looked like. And the longer she's gone, I think the more beautiful the model was, right? They forget all the bad stuff and remember all the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is so great. Yeah.
All right. Final question.
Okay.
When in your life do you feel the most love?
Shoot, now you're going to make me tear up. Tyler. Uh, I think when I feel the most love, Tyler, is uh, in prayer. When I'm in prayer, uh, sharing my pain and my struggle, and the ability I feel like I have to hand over, those the hard and be uplifted is that is when, and isn't that interesting that it's not other people, that it's divinity that I believe in, and I've never been asked that question before, and it's a good question, and that is when I feel the most love, when I'm kneeling in by my bed and I'm expressing my fears and my worries and my doubts and my pain and my suffering, and I feel an overwhelming amount of love and who I am, and why I'm here. And I know I'll see my wife again. And I have that belief, and it gives me overwhelming love.
Kyle, thank you so much.
Tyler, thank you.